I know some people are taking economics this afternoon. Some people are taking economics, so we won't have as many people as usual, but I'm going to share my screen and go through this week. Of course, now we're in a situation where we have some people who have already taken the AP exam and some people who are taking it next week digitally. So today, I felt like the best way that we could address that would be to go over the free response questions that were on the test last week, because they're not going to be the same ones for the digital testers. There'll be different passages and different questions and all that stuff, so that you can kind of get a feel for what your classmates was on their test last Wednesday. And that will give us some good information about where we might need to go and what you might want to think about and practice before the digital test on the 18th. So go into Google Classroom there if you have your computer handy, or you can look on my screen here. There's some things I want to go through today. Sometimes with the digital testers, I need to talk with you guys. I made an assignment for you this week because we have the test is a week from tomorrow. So I just want to make sure everybody's all set and ready to go. So first we'll talk about the updates, then we'll talk about the FRQs, and then I'll talk to the digital testers about what they need to do to get ready. So just a reminder, this is an A week. So we have formatives today, Wednesday, and Friday. The questions, today's question is kind of from the AP exam, but the questions from here on out, starting Wednesday, are going to lean toward research. I regret that normally we would do a research paper in this class, like an 8-page research paper, and we just didn't have the time. I felt like I would completely like demolish whatever energy stores people had. We usually do that though, so that if you're heading off to college, you're prepared. It's senior English, even though the juniors are here. If you take the independent study class, we do research and we practice that kind of writing, but I feel like it's a good skill to make sure that you have at least a working knowledge about research papers at the college level. So the formatives, I have to do formatives until Monday, the 24th, for attendance, just to mark you present. We're not going to be having class until that point, but I have to do attendance. So I'm going to set up some the formatives that you have to do for attendance as just some like little background information about research papers because of my guilt. So I'm going to just give you that heads up. Today's question is about Q3 from last Wednesday, and the rest of them are pretty much going to be just fundamentals on research and that sort of thing. So I feel like at least you got some info there. We have 2 remaining classes. Wednesday, I don't need to meet with the people who already tested. So if you did the paper test last week, you do not need to come on Wednesday. Also on Wednesday this week, if you have done your assignment to download, set up, and practice the digital AP test, you do not need to come on Wednesday. But I'm giving a grade for that because I looked on my dashboard and hardly any of the digital testers have actually downloaded the app. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in class. So it's going to be a grade to download it, set it up, and practice it, because I have a dashboard on AP Classroom that tells me who's downloaded it, who's set it up, and who's practiced. And you have to have that done by Wednesday, or come to class on Wednesday and I'll walk you through it, because I don't want us to be waiting until Monday to try to figure out that your computer crashes every time you get on the app or something like that. So I'm going to talk about that later on, that assignment, but it's obviously not for the people who've already tested. And then Monday the 17th, we'll have a final Zoom class. And again, that's just going to be a review for the digital testers. Digital testers are testing on the 18th. So I do not plan to give a semester exam in this course. I know that I could, and probably the office wants me to, but I feel like it feels like a lot after we just did the AP exam. Some years we do, like, because we're coming to class those last few weeks, we do different kinds of projects, like teach a poem that you really love or different things like that. And I just don't feel like, I feel like we can just average out the semester. If you feel cheated about that and you really want to take a semester exam, you can email me and I'll work something up for you. But I feel like you all worked pretty hard this semester. We drilled for AP a lot. And we're just taking the test now. So I don't feel like another big test that you'd have to study for and go over is necessary. So what I'll be doing is just taking your semester average, however it works out at the end of the six weeks, and just taking that average and putting it in as your exam. If you really want to take an exam, like if you feel like you want to improve your grade, then you can email me and I'll, come up with something that you could do for that semester exam. But I'm not going to give a semester exam to the class as a whole. So hopefully you understand why I decided to do that and you're not upset or anything like that. I'm trying to think what else was on my list to talk to you about. I usually put it all right there in the updates. Underneath here, just a reminder that teacher appreciation cards. This is WISD Teacher Appreciation Week. Last week was National Teacher Appreciation Week. This week is WISD Teacher Appreciation Week. So, I feel pretty appreciated around here. But if you wanted to do some cards, we've had almost 400 cards completed on campus in the first week, last week, because I gave it to all the other English teachers so they could use it with their students too. So if you wanted to do that, you still have until Friday. There's a link here with the apple there. There's a link where you can go to the website, and I showed this to you last week, so it's nothing new. But if you still wanted to send some of those out, you have until Friday. I'll be turning the card generator off, Friday night or something like that. So if you still want to do that, that is cool. I've been receiving a few, and it's super, what's fun about it is they're kind of random. You're sitting there doing your work and you get the little notification that you got an email. So you're thinking, is it more work or notification of something, not too pleasant? And you open up the email and it's like, teacher appreciation note, yay. So you drop everything to read it. But anyway, I just thought that I would share with you that that's still open if you didn't get a chance last week. Formatives are this week. All right, let's talk about the free response questions that were on last week's AP exam. I cannot share them with you in the Google Drive because they're documents that you're not allowed to share. You can talk about them, but you can't disseminate them. So I can't make it so that you can make a copy and put it in your drive or anything like that. But I do have them right here. Oh, no, wait, that's not what I have right there. I have it right here. I do have it right here. So I thought that we would talk about them a little bit. And those of you who had these questions, maybe you can chime in a little bit if you want to talk about what you did in that particular essay. And those of you who still have to take the test, you could be thinking about what you would do if this was your question, or maybe as I'm talking about them, you can get some tips that you could jot down to prepare for Tuesday. So the first of the 3 questions, remember that you have 2 hours to do 3 essays. I was giving a test last week and there were some people who did not know how long they had, didn't know how long the test was, didn't know how many questions there were. And I don't know whose fault that is, but it made the testing way longer than it needed to be. In any case, there are 3 questions. You have to answer all 3 of them. On some tests, you get to pick, like you must do number 1, you could choose between 2 and 3, but you have to do all 3 of these. That's why I've been practicing all 3. So the first question was a poetry question, and it was a poem called The Man with the Saxophone. Always read the prompt first because you don't have time to look for everything in the poem like we would if it was a homework assignment or like a half an hour discussion here in class. You're on a timetable. So you're only going to be looking in the poem for what they say they want you to write about. So remember, just a reminder, background. In AI's poem, The Man with the Saxophone, published in 1985, the speaker encounters a man playing a saxophone. I don't even know why they needed to say that because that's literally the title of the poem, but okay, College Board, fine. Read the poem carefully. I don't know why they say that either, but then in a well-written essay, now here's the task. I highlighted it so that you could see I'm isolating it. This is what I'm looking for in the poem. Analyze how the poet uses literary elements and techniques to convey the complexity of the speaker's encounter with the saxophone player at that particular time and place. Well, as soon as I see time and place, what am I going to think of? Setting. So part of my answer needs to deal with setting, right? Because they could have just stopped right here with the sentence, right? Explain how he uses literary elements and techniques to convey the complexity of the speaker's encounter with the saxophone player, period. In which case it would be kind of like a characterization of a moment or an encounter that two people have. But they added at that particular time and place, which makes me think I need to put, maybe it's not a major element in my essay, but I need to put something in there about the setting. So while I'm reading, I'm going to pay attention to two main things. One, the setting, and two, what is the speaker's encounter with the saxophone player and what happens? So if I'm focusing on those two things, then I should be able to answer this question. I do like that. I did not expect that they would put this on there. They have never done this before. There's like a little blurb reminding you what you need to do in your essay. And if you look at it, it's basically the rubric, right? That we've been practicing. You get a point for the thesis right here if it's defensible. Then you get up to 4 points for selecting evidence and supporting it. So, you know, they're already walking through the rubric, and then of course, grammar and punctuation. I don't know why they had to say that, but I guess some people don't do that. So let's look at the poem. It goes like this. New York, 5 a.m. The sidewalk's empty. Only the steam pouring from the manhole cover seems alive as I amble from shop window to shop window, sometimes stopping to stare, sometimes not. Last week's snow is brittle now and unrecognizable as the soft white hair that bearded the face of the city. I head farther down Fifth Avenue toward the 30s, my mind empty, like the Buddhists tell you is possible if only you don't try. If only I could turn myself into a bird like the shaman I was meant to be, but I can't. I'm earthbound and solitude is my companion, the only one you can count on. Don't try to tell me otherwise. I've had it all and lost it and I never want it back. Only give me this morning to keep, the city asleep, and there on the corner of 34th and 5th, the man with the saxophone, his fingerless gloves caked with grime, his face also, the layers of clothes welded to his skin. I set down my case. He steps backward to let me know I'm welcome, and we stand a few minutes in the silence so complete, I think I must be somewhere else, not here, not in this city, this heartland of pure noise. Then he puts the sax to his lips again, and I raise mine. I suck the air up from my diaphragm and bend over into the cold golden reed, waiting for the notes to come. And when they do, for that one moment, I'm the unencumbered bird of my imagination, rising only to fall back toward concrete, each note a black flower, opening, mercifully opening into the unforgiving new day. All right, so setting is clearly stated in the first line. So I can go with, New York City. I can go with nighttime or early morning. I can go with sort of like an empty city kind of feel. There's this one guy who's there, and when he runs into him, he decides to play saxophone because that guy also plays the saxophone. So it's not clear to me whether they are playing together or not. But okay. Maybe he's the man with the saxophone. In any case, I need to address the complexity of the speaker's encounter. So it's about the flaws and the beauty, right? Like there's the guy there, he's got fingerless, sort of grimy grimy gloves, but then the beauty of the music and the beauty of the cityscape at night. The quiet versus the music because of the time of night. So I could tie the setting in that way, or desire and reality, his desire to be free, right? I kind of made a little note here because if I was reading this for the test, I probably would have made a mental note that on this side, we have this idea of freedom, turning yourself into a bird. He seems to want to do that. And it's probably about freedom. And then over here, when he plays his music, he experiences that and compares it in metaphor to the bird. So I think I could probably make an essay. You could go a lot of different directions with this essay, but that's probably where I would go with complexity. So it's not complex to say, oh, there's a guy, he plays a saxophone on a street and it makes him feel good, right? Like that, there has to be more to it. So maybe the more to it is something like how music is soothing to the soul, or how in a quiet moment we can find peace. I don't know, anybody else who took the test want to chime in on something that they talked about in their essay?
How music transforms someone.
Okay, yeah. Music can transform you, because that's exactly what happens over here. He transforms into that bird when he's playing. And even the notes transform, right? He sees them visually falling to the ground and opening like a black flower. So there's that transformation too. Yeah, I think that works. Just because, I mean, like there could be a lot more in this poem. I'll probably get this one when I go to grade. I'll probably get this one, but see more in it the more I read it. But I read it this weekend, and those are the thoughts that I had about it. But one thing I like about this poem, it's not terribly difficult to read. There's not any words that I don't understand. There's a couple of references like Fifth Avenue and 34th and 5th and the 30s. Those all have to do with the streets in New York, but maybe you've seen enough movies and TV shows or watched enough Friends that you already know those references. I don't know. 34th and 5th, I don't know what that means, like what kind of neighborhood that is, but maybe people in New York do, but I don't think I'm expected to know that as I'm writing the answer to this. So if I was going to be working up an essay, first thing I would do is try to write a thesis, and I would double check that it's got both things: the complexity of the speaker's encounter and the particular time and place, and the literary elements and techniques, because I need to be able to say, oh, it's repetition, it's the first person narrator, it's the imagery, that kind of thing that gets to the techniques. So I need to say the poet's doing this to create this environment and to teach us a lesson about the situation, and he's using imagery and the first person narrator to do it. Right. So as long as I can sort of meld those together into a thesis and then support it with quotations from the poem, I'm probably in pretty good shape. Any other comments on that one before we look at number 2? I gotta change my screen. Oh wait, I totally disappeared my screen. Hey, there. I'm gonna change to this background. I don't know. I know this is kind of a lame thing to do on Zoom, but it makes me happy, and it's something different every day. So I have a swimming background. I don't know if you could see, there's like a old swimming hole river type thing, and here's a big old tree, which figures prominently in question number 2. I don't know what this is from. I don't recognize it, but let's look at it. So question number 2 was a prose piece, and luckily also not one that was too difficult to read, although I think that it was it was from Britain, because of some of the references that they have, or Ireland, something like that. There's a couple of words that they have to clear up for either that reason, or it's from a region in America that I don't know the references. So let's look at it. Same thing here. Here's the background, and then here's the task. The following excerpt is from Tom Winston's novel Breath, published in 2008. As soon as I saw 2008, I thought, Whew, it might be complex, but at least it's not going to be vocabulary complex, right? In this passage, the main character, Bruce Pike, recalls an incident in a nearby river. Okay, so already my radar is telling me figure out what the incident is. They don't tell you, so I have to negotiate that as I'm reading. Read the passage carefully. Then in a well-written essay, analyze how Winston uses literary elements and techniques to present the complex response of the narrator to the incident at the riverbank. They keep calling it an incident, so for sure I have to figure out what that is. And I also have to figure out what is Winston's response to the incident, and what are the literary elements and techniques that help the author to discuss those. So I'm gonna read through it. I know if you took the test last week, you've already read it, but the people who weren't there don't have a copy. So I'm gonna read through it. It's a little bit longer than the usual ones. At the first signs of spring giving way to summer, towny kids gathered after school near the bridge at the riverbank to dive off the crude springboard. The river was brown with tannin and cold as hell, but it was very slow flowing and safe to swim in. It was there that Looney and I became friends. Ivan Loon was 12 and a whole year older than me. He was the publican's son. A publican is a person who runs the pub. A pub is a word for a bar. He was the publican's son, and although we'd been at school together half our lives, we never had the remotest thing in common. That is, before we realized we'd each independently perfected the art of causing riverside panic. All right, so already I'm thinking incident and I'm thinking riverside panic. So I'm starting to put together what the incident is. One November afternoon, I coasted down to the river on my bike to have a jump off the plank, but when I got there, 4 girls and somebody's mother were slithering up and down the bank, yanking at their own ears and screaming that there was a boy in the water, that he was drowning right beneath them. Naturally, they didn't know which boy because they were from out of town, but they knew he was a boy, for he'd been there a minute ago and simply hadn't come up from a dive. And were there sharks? And couldn't I, for God's sake, stop asking questions and just get on with doing something? Sun blazed down in rods through the big old gums. There's a footnote about that. They're a certain kind of tree. There were dragonflies in the air above us. I saw a towel near the diving plank, and beside it, a grubby pair of thongs. And they have to put a note on that too, because they don't want you thinking that it's underwear. They want you to understand that it's flip-flop sandals. So you can have an image. So I had no reason to doubt there was a crisis. Only the sluggish water seemed harmless, and these females who were making a frightful noise looked so strangely out of place. I should have twigged. I should have known, I think is the reference. Understood, I should have realized. But I went into action on their behalf. As I bolted out to the sagging end, the springboard, the wood was hot and familiar underfoot. I looked down at the wind-ruffled surface of the river and tried to think. I decided that it would be best to wade in from the bank, to work my way out by feel, and just keep diving and groping in the hope of touching something human. There wasn't time to go looking for help. I was it. I felt myself rise to the moment, put upon, but taller all of a sudden. And before I could embark upon my mission or even pull my shirt off, Ivan Loon burst from the water. He came up so close to shore with such a feral shriek, the woman fell back on the mud as if shot. I stood bouncing on the plank while she lay in the muck. Then she reared up on her elbows. Looney started to laugh, which didn't really help her mood. I had never in my life seen a woman so angry. She charged into the water, lunging and swiping to no avail, while Looney just ducked and fainted and giggled. He was a freckly sort of kid, but he went so red with pleasure and exertion, all his freckles disappeared. The poor woman never got close to him. Her frock ballooned about her. She made tanty noises like a toddler. Tanty, they say like a tantrum. Looney sculled himself out of range, bobbed provocatively for a bit, then stroked off to the shadows of the far bank. Left alone with her once again, I realized it was more fun to pull this prank than it was to stand by while someone else did it. I began to feel more guilt than glee. 2 Dr. Scholl's sandals floated upstream in the breeze, and I watched until I could bear it no longer and dived dutifully after them. As I snared them and side-stroked back to the bank, they clunked together like firewood. It was embarrassing to see this grown woman standing there in her clinging dress with her dimpled knees and chubby legs all muddy. You could see it's kind of a humor passage. There's tree roots down there, I told her. You just dive down and hold on, it's easy. She never said a thing, just snatched her shoes and scrambled back to the girls higher up the bank. And while I lay in the water trying to decide how to feel about her, she smoothed herself back into some kind of authority and led the others up through the trees and out of sight. I felt sympathy and contempt all at once. Car doors slammed and there was the stammer of a starter motor. Okay, so if I go back to the prompt, obviously the incident is that this guy, Ivan Loon, faked out a bunch of, a lady with her bunch of girls that he was drowning, and he went down and didn't come back up, but they didn't know each other. And our narrator, first person narrator again, knows that trick. He knows that location. He's done that trick before, because he says, we realized that we each independently perfected the art of causing Riverside panic. They didn't know each other, but they both knew that prank. He says over here, I should have known. Then he says, I realized it was more fun to pull this prank than it was to stand by while someone else did it. So he sort of jumps into action at first when the ladies start saying somebody's down there and didn't come back up. It doesn't occur to him at first that it's a prank that he does. But after Ivan comes up and walks away, he realizes that, maybe it's not fun to be played a prank on you like that when you think somebody might be dying, but he's done it plenty of times. And at the end we have, I felt sympathy and contempt all at once. So he feels bad for her, but he also is sort of angry at her at the same time, like for falling for it. And also for making him realize that it's probably not something, you should do if you're a mature person. So if I go back to the task, analyze how Winston uses literary elements and techniques to represent the complex response of the narrator. I think the parts that I highlighted get at that, but there are other parts that you could mention probably that get to his complex attitude. I made a little box up here. So his complex response is kind of like, he kind of falls for the same thing that he does to people. And he has that realization. It's almost a little bit like Araby. Remember that story that we read? Did we read that first semester? But he has that realization that maybe it's funny if you're doing it, but maybe it's not so funny if you're the one getting pranked. And so he realizes the horror that other people feel. And now he's kind of in an in-between place. When you're a kid, you don't think about those kinds of consequences. You just think it's a funny thing to do. But when you get older, you're like, I really wouldn't want somebody to do that to me. And so now he sort of projects his feelings about that onto the woman. And she leaves. So what about devices? I have to be able to talk about elements and techniques. In this case, I think I would talk about first person narrator, the first person narrator being the guy who used to do the prank and now he's having it, like he's involved in it being done to him, and so he's got mixed feelings about that. The first person narrator really helps with that. We get a view into his mind about how that feels, and also the realization that he used to do that prank. So I would probably talk about first person narrator here. Anybody take the test, want to talk about a different direction that you might have gone or different techniques that you might have written about? Magali, Alexa, any of you guys? Is it pretty much what you did? Okay. Well, you don't have to share. Mainly, I just want to make sure that the people who are testing next week can kind of see the sorts of things that were on your test. Obviously, yours won't look exactly like this because you'll be doing it online. All right, the third question, the open question, is the one that we've been practicing most recently. Last week, I had a whole bunch of questions for you on, like practice, previous tests, what work would you choose? I think that this year was a little tricky on the paper test and, to pick something, but I think you had options. So the topic was this: in many works of fiction, houses take on symbolic importance. Such houses may be literal houses or unconventional ones like hotels, hospitals, monasteries, or boats. Either from your own reading or from the list below, choose a work of fiction in which a literal or unconventional house serves as a significant symbol. So job number one, choose a piece of literature that you've read of literary merit that is either listed below or from your own reading that has the significant presence of a house and that house symbolizes something. So you don't want to just pick a work where you haven't thought about what the house in that work symbolizes, because then you have to work all that out as you're writing the essay. So that's the first job. The second one is, how does the house and the symbol of the house contribute to the interpretation of the work as a whole? How does that make it meaningful? So I put a little list here. These would be the main things that I would be trying to get to in my essay. I have to say which house, what piece, whose house. If it's a unconventional house, how is that thing a house? Like I might write, it's not on the list, but if I was writing this essay, I'd probably write about Life of Pi. In that there's a boy who survives a shipwreck, and he's on a little tiny boat, and that's his home for the majority of the work. So I'd have to first establish that the boat was his house. And then I could talk about how that boat signified his lifeline, really, and how it was his existence. And there's a tiger in the boat and some, other stuff, because there was a zoo on board the ship that sunk and the animals are being transported. I might also note that 3 of the works that I gave you to read over Christmas break were on the list. I'm shocked, but I'm happy about that. The only one that's not on there is The Things They Carried. But there's a pretty good shot that there was something on the list to give you like a jolt, but you didn't have to use the list. Maybe some of you had said that you had read To Kill a Mockingbird. Oh, I have to change my background. Why didn't y'all tell me? Oh, I have a background set up. There. It's Gem and Scout. See, it's Gem and Scout looking at Boo Radley's house in To Kill a Mockingbird. So maybe sometimes Mr. Ramos in English 3 AP teaches A Streetcar Named Desire. Maybe when you were younger, freshman, sophomore year, you might have read A House on Mongo Street. I would probably maybe also write about Great Expectations. I know they don't teach that anymore. Or I might have written about And the Earth Did Not Devour Him by Tomás Rivera, if you've read that. If you have read things in Spanish, like maybe you're in Spanish Lit AP, you can write about them on the English Lit as long as you write about it in English. So like obviously, so you can write about Don Quixote, or you can write about any of those other books that you might have written. And the Earth Did Not Devour Him is written in Spanish. It's a dual book. It's written in English and Spanish. And in that book, maybe you haven't read it, but it's pretty short. It's a very good book. It's got its stories basically at the beginning that aren't really connected, and then in the final story, there's a boy who instead of going to school, he hides under his house, and he thinks about all these different things that have happened to his family members, and you start realizing that that's the stories from the previous part of the book, but he's hiding underneath the house to try to get away from going to school. And he's scared that he's going to get caught, and so the house becomes a symbol of his safety, but also a symbol of his mischievous behavior. So I feel like you probably had a good run at choosing something that was significant. So as long as you wrote identified the house in the work, identified what it symbolizes, and then explained the meaning, like how that symbol creates meaning in the text, then I think you're probably okay. What'd you guys write about? What work did you choose? Magali, what did you write about? Is Magali still here? No. Alexa, what did you write about?
Oh, I typed it in chat. I put metamorphoses.
Oh, Yeah, that's a good one too. Sorry, my chat stuck behind the little window there. Yeah, metamorphosis. Yeah, so what'd you write about Gregor's room?
Yeah.
Or the apartment of the Samsas, right? They're stuck there, kind of financially, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, here's the problem with these conversations. Like the people who already took the test are kind of like, well, I already turned it in, so you know, and usually we come back the day after the test when we're in regular, day-to-day school, and people, I'll be like, so do you want to talk? Like the day that I get the questions, I'm excited, I want to talk about it, and they're like, we don't want to talk about it. So I don't know, but that's what those are the questions that they had. So I guess if you are still taking the test next week, you could be thinking to yourself, could I have done that? Could I have written that essay? What could I do between now and Tuesday to put me a little closer to doing a good job on those kinds of essays? But really clearly, I think you can see that the practices we've been doing are these 3 questions, basically, with just different passages. We've been doing them all along. So I feel like you could write about Boo Radley. Or I would probably, I don't know, I was going back and forth this weekend on it when I was looking at it. I might also write about Great Expectations because there's this really good character in Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, Miss Havisham, and she got jilted at the author. Do y'all know what that means? Jilted? Can you guess? What do you think it means? Anybody want to guess? Jilted means that you got left at the altar. So you showed up, but the other one didn't. They jilted you. So Miss Havisham is wealthy and she's got this fancy house and she's got this fancy wedding prepared, like her family's decked the whole place out and the guy doesn't show. And so she has like a mental breakdown and she wears that dress. She's like 90 years old in the book and she's still wearing the dress that she was wearing that day. And like everything around her is crumbling. There's cobwebs on the table. The old, like the plates of the food are still there and they're like, hardened and, petrified by now. And her house is crumbling around her because she just never moved on. She just sort of walks around in this house. She raises a daughter, but it's not really her daughter. It's like a ward that she has. And yeah, so the house represents her humiliation and her inability to move past it. So I might write about that too. But all right. Any questions on, I think it was a good test. I feel pretty good about it. Sometimes I read the poem and I'm like, yeesh, like that's a tough one. Like the landlady one was kind of tough, but all right, hopefully that helps those of you that are testing next week. All right, let me talk about the assignment for those of you who are doing digital testing. So whether you're here in class right now or whether you're watching this later, you have an assignment to do before Wednesday. I have on my AP Classroom, I have tools and I can look and see who has already downloaded the app and who has set it up and who has practiced. So if you're digital testing, like if your name is over here, that means you're digital testing. I need for you by Wednesday to download the app to the computer that you're going to use for the test. If you are using a school Chromebook, they've already pushed it out to you. It's already available to you on the Chromebook. But if you're using your own laptop or a desktop that's your own, you need to download the app. So the assignment is here. So you need to, I made a separate assignment for it though, right here. So digital testers, I'm going to give you 100 if by Wednesday you download the app or verify that it's on your Chromebook, set it up, and practice. You have to practice with the app to know how to go forward, what the little tools are for. You have to practice the whole thing. I think it's got a little bit of a tutorial. Now, here are the 4 steps. So if you go to where it says assignment, download, setup, and practice, here's how you're going to do that. You go to 4 steps right here, and it will walk you right through it. Everything to click on, right? So if on Wednesday before class, I go to my little dashboard over here, and I see that you have logged in, set up, and practiced. You can't check in, do the exam, or makeup yet. That's for the day of the test. But I should see that you have logged in, set up, and practiced. Then you don't need to come to class on Wednesday. I mean, unless you have class questions about the interface. But if I see that, if I check before class or lunchtime on Wednesday, and you don't have that done, then I'm expecting you in class so I can help you get that taken care of. And I will give you the 100 at that point. So if you can take care of it yourself, that's fine. Do it for Wednesday and you don't have to come to class. But if you need some help getting that going, then I want to offer that to you on Wednesday. I don't want to be waiting until Monday to find out, you know, my computer always crashes or what have you. So I can already see what everybody's status is, and that's where the grade's going to come from. Does that make sense? So if you click on that link, it takes you through the different steps. And then step 3 and 4 are on the day of the test. Or this is like completing the setup, and then 30 minutes before the exam, you have to sign in because they have security things that they're going to have you do for 30 minutes before the test. So that means 11:30 in the morning next Tuesday. I'm not going to be there to remind you. You're going to have to set an alarm on your phone, you know, set it for 9 o'clock so you can be up and awake and all that stuff. But the first step is getting your computer ready for it, because you can't do it that day. It's not on a website. It's on an app that you have to download to your computer. Are there any questions about that? It's easy 100. If you took the paper test, you're excused. Obviously, you don't need to download the app. You don't need to. So where did I get to this page? Notice that it tells you go here, download here, get all the stuff. Everything is step by step. It's right here where it says assignment, download, setup, and practice. Practice right there. Okay. And you can just put done, or you can hit whenever you have it done, and then I'll know to go look on the dashboard to double check that you've done all the steps and you've already practiced. All right. If you've already taken the test, I don't have an assignment for you this week. There really aren't any more assignments because we're just, focusing on the people who need to test next week. And then that's pretty much it for the course, because I told you I'm not going to do a semester exam. So we have class Wednesday for the people who need setup or haven't set up. And then Monday, all of the digital testers, I would like for all of you to be there so that we can do a final review before you go to your test on Tuesday. All right. Questions? Anybody? Everybody's good? All right, well, hopefully going over the most recent test from last week was helpful for you. There are some other things that you can do. I put a note here. Use the practice within the testing app. You can also remember that down here, I put additional study resources. You could go back over the rubrics for the free response. You can learn about how to get the bonus point on the essays. You could do some more practice tests if you think you need to do practice tests. I like these because after you do the test, it's got the explanations for the right answers. So, somebody's explaining to you why that's the right one, kind of like I was orally. Some study guides and also some videos that some AP teachers have made that might be helpful from the College Board. So you do have some things you need to do before the test next week. If there aren't any questions, then I'm going to go ahead and sign off. If something comes up or you need help with something, just email me and I will get back to you. All right. All right. I will see some of you on Wednesday then, and others I will see next Monday. And those of you who've already tested, I don't think you need to come back to class if you don't want to. That's sad to me, but juniors, maybe I'll see you next year, right? In person, hopefully. All right, I'm gonna sign off for today. Take care, everybody, and I'll see you next time I see you, depending on your situation. Bye.